Chris MacDonald is the author of the new book, Days and Days, a story about Sunderland's Leatherface and the ties that bind. Welcome to the Book Down Rock podcast, Chris.
Thank you, Eric. Thanks for having me.
The preface describes the book as being about two stories woven together. So let's start there. Tell us about this book and what are the two stories?
Well, one of the narratives follows my friend and I, Jason, on this sort of rollicking backpacking journey through England, Ireland, and Scotland, where we ended up meeting up with the band Leatherface. And I suppose the other story is the story of Leatherface, and in a roundabout way.
What a band. What a band. I'm so glad that I read this book because I now have a new band I can listen to. Thanks to
great.
you.
Yeah, they're lesser known. They should be more well known than they are, I believe.
Yeah. And let's talk about your friendship with Jason, special friendship that you have with him. You write, quote, our dynamic was complicated. We were both bad news, only in different ways. I didn't live for confrontation the way he did. When did you first meet Jason?
Oh, I think it was I must have been about 16 or 17, I think, somewhere in there.
And what was your first impression of him?
Trouble. Just trouble. I just knew he was trouble right from the get-go. But, he also knew I was trouble as well. So
you guys hit it off. Do you have a lot of stuff in common? Music?
Yeah. Yeah. It really was music, the thing that brought us very close together. Yeah.
Where did you meet? Were you in school together?
Well, no, Jason was from King City in Ontario, and I was from a little farther south than that, more in the city, but not that far. And, back then, we had a crowd of sort of punks and skaters and all that sort of thing. And we heard about eventually those two crowds, the crowds from King City and Rexdale, sort of merged at some point, just because that's what you did. If you heard about another crowd that was similar, eventually those two crowds just came together, and it was a lot of fun.
And he introduced you to Leatherface. He had a cassette of their music.
He did.
He had it in his hand. He says, you need to hear this. And you played it. You nail it with the vocals. Sounds like Lemmy's younger punk rock brother. That is perfect. It really that was what I was thinking when I first heard it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Describe that moment, your immediate reaction to the music, because the way you describe it in the book, it's exactly the way I felt when I first heard my favorite band, Van Halen. There's like lightning inside of you. And I think everybody who's listening who has a favorite band knows that feeling. Describe that.
Yeah, it's universal for sure. Doesn't matter the type of music. But for me, for somebody who's on a constant search for music at that time, it was really the thing that was, it was just driving me hard. And discovery, just what a beautiful thing. So, and when we'd go to that person's house in the book, and we'd all just hang out and literally just show each other new music, or just, whatever we had at the time. And when he put that on, I had never heard anything that sounded like that in my whole life, and it was, it really was. It was life altering, and it cut deep.
And you had never heard of the band at that point?
No, and I was fairly attuned to most things in that genre, punk and hardcore, whatever, and he was just his finger was always sort of, he knew a few people whose finger was really on the pulse of things, so it sort of trickled down, you know what I mean? But thankful.
Well, I do want to get into the stories of your trip with Jason. We're going to get to that, but let's let's continue with Leatherface some more. The book celebrates the band, its impact on you and many others. The Guardian called them the greatest British punk band of the modern era. You
Hmm.
spoke to band members, colleagues, and friends of the band to put together the story of the band. They formed in 1988. How did they form? What's the origin story of Leatherface?
I mean, I don't, I wasn't there, so I don't know the exact uh, way that it happened. But from from what I do know, there's there's a place in Sunderland called the Bunker, and that is basically a punk rock institution, a DIY. It started as a DIY space for just all things under that umbrella. It was a rehearsal space. They held shows, whatever. Now it's a record label, and so it was a hub. And everyone who was into that sort of thing was there at that time. And eventually, uh, Dickie Hammond was playing in HDQ at the time, and so was Laney, the drummer. And eventually they found Stubbs, and they just started. It started with, like most bands, just in a rehearsal behind Frankie's house and in a garage, and that was
Frankie
it.
Stubbs, right? Frankie Stubbs
Hmm.
and Dickie Hammond.
Yeah.
Okay, and then Laney came in a little bit after that. I think it was Frankie and Dickie were the first two that
Yeah.
started it.
Yeah, they started new, and it's a funny story because they at that time um there's a guitar maker out there that's still going called Gordon Smith Guitars, and the two of them had the same guitar, and that was really, they were so stoked that the other one had the same guitar that they just started playing together, and it turns out that they played really well together. And then Laney left HDQ and and joined with those two.
How did the band get that name Leatherface? Is there a story behind that?
From what I was told from Frankie, uh, yeah, he was apparently pretty inebriated with Dickie Hammond one night in their apartment, and literally lying on the floor and watching. Frankie's favorite movie at that time was Leatherface or Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Okay, I knew it. I had a feeling.
and
I had a feeling there was a connection there.
and it's literally playing on the TV while they're trying to uh think of a band name. And but also it was this other funny thing that happened where Frankie had a bit of a light bulb moment and got up and pulled a book off the shelf. And I believe the author's name is Ernest Dudley. I may have that wrong, but it might be right. Um, and he wrote a book called Leatherface, and he just, between the two things, they just sort of knew. And it does, it works. It strangely embodies the
Yes.
music in
Yeah,
many ways.
if you listen to the music, yeah, it's a perfect name. Yeah, there's an
Hmm.
interesting comment regarding the sound of the band in the book. Simon
Yeah.
Wells from the band Snuff said
Hmm.
Leatherface's distinction from other punk music can be traced to frontman Frankie Stubbs' love for the band The Police, which is one
Oh
of
yeah.
my favorite bands.
Oh yeah.
They did cover Message in a Bottle, which is, I
Hmm.
think, on the 91 album Mush.
Hmm.
Okay. Had you picked up on that before Simon said that?
I mean, yeah, I don't think I had picked it out, you know. I mean, for sure it was reminiscent, even the song How Lonely, you know. I think I caught that one sort of early on, but it wasn't until I started hearing other people, and then you really can hear um this similarity, especially with the guitar playing, you know, when you start breaking it down. And the most noticeable of those would be the song Little White God, which came off a later album called The Last. If you listen to that, the guitaring is like, it's so Police, even the song construction, everything. Yeah.
That's interesting.
Hmm.
And Frankie's an interesting guy. Big reader. One of his favorite books is One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest by Ken
Hmm.
Kelsey. You feel there may be parallels in Leatherface songs with this book?
Yeah, I feel, I don't know. I think that Leatherface is, when you start diving deep into those lyrics, they question everything. And they're on a search for like a much deeper truth than, the type of truth that doesn't, the one that really matters. And I believe that some of the things that I read in that book were similar in a sense. Um, yeah, it's difficult to describe really, but
He's a big reader just in general,
yeah.
which seems to be a theme. I've said this now, I think, mentioned this in two episodes recently. It just seems like the front man or the lyricist of a band, if they're a
Mm,
big reader, they're they're always great lyricists. It's because they've expanded their language. They're well read. I mean,
yeah,
it just seems to be the correlation there is pretty
yeah,
obvious. Yeah,
yeah.
he
Frankie's a thinker, like
yeah.
on that level for sure.
You write about Dave Grohl asking Leatherface drummer Laney for his autograph. Tell us this story.
Hmm.
This is back in the mid '80s. Dave was in a band called Scream before Nirvana. This is
Yeah,
when he was in Scream.
yeah. Discord Scream, and that was a story that Laney told me, and he was so stoked to to tell it. I guess they were playing at, I think it was Punk's Picnic in Birmingham, and yeah, years before he joined Nirvana. But you know, it just really lit him up that, I mean, at that time he was still pretty, had some notoriety, just because of the band. The band was pretty popular, and I think it felt pretty nice for him he was a big fan of HDQ, and came up to him with two full-length LPs after the set and asked him to autograph them. And I think that made him feel pretty all right.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Back to Frankie, you say that on the street you'd never know he was the lead singer of an important band and inspired the lives of so many around the globe. Quiet
Hmm.
guy?
At times,
At
it's
times.
he seems to have two sides. I mean, he's a human. Obviously, there's many facets. But from what I've seen, there seems to be two sides. He's really, like, he's super joyful. He's super playful. Um, he's uh, he's like a bit mischievous, um, but he is also extremely quiet and just very introverted. And you know that was the funny thing on our journey, was that I had never met him. I had met him once, very briefly, in Buffalo before our trip, and but it was literally like, hello, amazing set, thank you. Um and at that point I'd been listening to them for years, and was enamored, and had I had sort of built up this thing in my head, as we do, of the people that we look up to. And in my head, I did have it sort of nailed in a sense that, I just imagined him this person that was, um, that never talked to anybody really, And then my first meeting with him in Sunderland, like at a pub where he showed up to hang out with us, and he walks in and he's just like so funny and like a total animal, and he's just has the whole place laughing, and he's just on a tear, it freaked me out because I was like, oh, maybe I don't have it right. But
What's he up to these days now? Is he just working regular day job? Is he in a band?
well, he's doing a lot of solo shows at the
Yeah.
moment. Yeah, he's still playing, still filling clubs, and I mean not as much, obviously, but um, it's been a difficult road for them a little bit because Dickie died and Laney died not that long ago. Um, but he's keeping it alive, and he's been playing with the last incarnation of Leatherface is with Graham Philliskirk, who's um, an amazing dude who and longtime friend of the band who played in bands all around the time that Leatherface was playing, and they're tightly knit. Um, and he was the last bass player, and so they still play, and there's a side project coming,
Okay. I
and
mentioned because I think I read the book and it was something he worked is it a car dealership? Is that what he was doing during the
yeah, I
day?
think that's what he does for a day job.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know the details of it, but he sort of just described it like that because he won't talk about it. Like he's that guy. He really, I doubt he's even going to read the book because I don't think he's ever read a review of the band. I'm not sure if he knew the importance and the splash that they made, because he's just not interested in the spotlight. It's not what he signed up for. He's just doing it because it's just like a higher state, and maybe that's what um I see in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, just the real path.
Right. It's just a genuine passion of his that he followed,
Yeah,
never thinking about anything beyond that.
yeah.
What led to the breakup of Leatherface in '94?
I to be honest, I don't know.
Yeah.
Um, I think I think there was yeah, I think like most bands, there was probably some friction between the characters. These are big characters, right? And yeah, I think Dickie Hammond um and Stubbs probably weren't the greatest match at times, where at other times they were like a perfect match. Um, but I don't know too much about that, and they don't talk about it too much.
Mm,
There's rumors of them, I believe, I could be wrong, but I think that breakup happened on stage at a Toy Dolls concert. I think, but I could have that wrong.
yeah. They reformed in '98.
Hmm.
That lasted until 2012.
Yeah.
Would be cool though if they reform again, at least even for one show or
Well, I know, and the members that were in it after 88 or 98 are still they're still alive, and they're like, Davy Burden is alive and well and playing, and I talked to Leighton Evans as well. Yeah, in man, it would be amazing.
right. Yeah.
I don't know if it would ever happen, but
Well, sounds like from what you say about Frankie, it's for him it'd have to be for the right reasons. Something that
yeah,
felt
I
right.
mean,
It's like let's do
they're for
this.
sure they're for sure um with this side project, which is with Hugo Moody from a band called the St. Catharines, who's done other projects with them. They're for sure going to play a bunch of shows, and it's the next best thing. It's pretty close
Yeah.
to it.
Chris MacDonald is the author of the new book, Days and Days, a story about Sunderland's Leatherface and the ties that bind. So, throughout the book are stories of your journeys across the Atlantic with Jason. You sleep in train stations, you endure a haunting on top of a volcano. Let's get to this one. This is in Scotland. You write, quote, running parallel to the city was the imposing peak called Arthur's Seat in, I think it's pronounced, is it Holyrood Park or Holyrood Park?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, either one.
I mean, there it's probably pronounced quite
Yeah.
differently.
The long ridge watches over Edinburgh and offers an incredible view in all directions. One of the many myths of Scotland claims that the hill is actually a sleeping dragon. A more foreboding aspect involves 17 neatly arranged mini coffins that were discovered somewhere up on the hill. Tiny wooden figures dressed in rags were found inside. We set off weaving among the streets with our packs hoisted over our shoulders. By the way, great writer, man. This is the stories you tell,
Thank
beautifully
you.
written.
I
So
appreciate that.
what did you find? The goat man? And what did you find there? The goat
Oh no,
man.
I mean, I was just okay. So this is pretty funny stuff for me because yeah, it was the goat man was just it's just a funny like when I went to camp when I was young, it was that was one of the stories that the camp counselors would tell us. And it was like camp that was sort of on the side of a mountain, basically. Very small mountain next to Hamilton in Ontario. And so they told this story of the goat man, which is like, classic. He was a miner and got his legs were trapped in a landslide, and then he chopped his legs off and attached to goats and blah blah blah. But
There's a story.
yeah, I just love that story. So
Yeah.
it was just always on my mind. So whenever and something about that walking up Arthur's Seat, it was similar in a sense. It's this really steep incline. And yeah, so I just uh thought about the goat man. But it was freaky because also at that time, right before we left, I had watched the Blair Witch for the first time. Like that's right about the time when Blair Witch came out.
1999, I think, is when
Yeah.
this story
Yeah.
takes place. Yeah.
I swear yeah, I feel like I just watched it like months before we left. And next thing I know, we're in a tent on
Oh,
the side of this mountain at
seeing that
night.
movie
And
does not help.
oh
I mean,
man,
I even was creeped out just by my own
it's
backyard,
a great
seeing
movie.
there's woods in the backyard.
Yeah, and it tapped into for sure, and being in Edinburgh, it's, one of the more haunted cities in the world, I think. It's one of the, and I'm a bit, you know, I'm a bit susceptible to that sort of stuff. I love ghosts, but also hate them. But
Right.
anyways, yeah, we're just camping on the side of this thing, and I swear, I like I don't know. To this day, I still think about it. I could hear footsteps for sure
Yeah.
around the tent, but it could have been my head. I don't know.
Your imagination
Hmm.
running wild.
Yeah.
You were in Belfast, Northern Ireland, driven out by the IRA. What happened while you were there? This is 1999. So you
Yeah.
could feel that sense of discomfort and tension
Yes.
among the people there.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if we were actually driven out by the IRA, but it was pretty sketchy to
You
tell
weren't
you the
welcome,
truth.
I guess, is probably a better way, right? It was kind of like they were giving you those
There was,
vibes, like, what are you doing here?
yeah, there was a lot of tension there, because it was you could still feel it all, and it was I don't know what it's like there at the moment, but in 1999, yeah, it was still separated into three sections, Catholic, Protestant, and neutral. And, you know, it was just very heavy. It was very, very heavy. And ultimately, when we ended up in the Catholic section on Lower Falls Road, right across the street from RA headquarters, I mean, I was starting to get the impression that we stuck out like a sore thumb, probably from our looks, um, but for many reasons, and this we ended up in an IRA support store, which was one of the scariest things I've ever seen. Like it was just at that point I'd never been exposed to that sort of thing. And it's hard to understand. A lot of people don't know what happened there. You know, it's like they've heard about it, but they don't understand how bad and how intense it was. Like, you know, when you have to build a peace barrier between two crowds of people, you know, two different beliefs so that they don't kill each other. It's like, whoa. And being in that store was just, yeah, it was wild. And maybe, you know, we met this old guy and I tried to describe it the best way I could from memory and from what happened. Um, I don't know whether he's trying to protect us or whether he was just genuine and really wanted us to go out to the coast, maybe a bit of both. I don't know. But it was, you can feel it, right? You feel when something's a little off,
I
you
felt for
know.
the people that live there because they didn't seem like they could feel comfortable just living in their
Oh,
own country.
absolutely. Scary business. And I think really one of the most frightening things that I'd seen on that day was, I mean, everything. It just hits home, you know. But being in the Catholic section, and I think I wrote it in there, you know, just this one alleyway where we walk by and I look up and there's just this giant white spray paint on the wall, just super ragged. And it's, you know, little girl, you know, with her name killed by rubber bullets, you know,
Mm.
and you could feel everything just by looking at it. It's like you could feel the pain, you could feel the fright, you could feel the anger.
Yeah, you also tell the story of being in a terrible storm. You write, "quote I fell head over heels into the most beautiful trouble I've ever been in, and I'm better for it."
Oh, that was just a little segment written by Dickie's partner, and I just asked for a few words from her about Dickie, and so she just wrote that lovely little paragraph, and I love that last sentence. You know,
Yeah,
seems to encapsulate everything that I've heard about him.
yep.
It's like he just magnetic. You just fall in love with him, and you know he's a little bit of trouble. You know, I was thankful that she contributed that to it.
Yeah. And you write, "quote what I know about life is that you'll begin to see what you're truly looking for as long as you keep searching. It's a universal order. Adventure, romanticism, and inspiration were revealing themselves to us." This is in reference to being in the rehearsal space of Leatherface, your
Mhm.
teenage punk idols. This is a building steeped in cultural significance for the Sunderland music scene. How did you end up there, and what was that experience like for you?
Yeah, it freaked me out for sure. It was so that was a surprise actually because it wasn't planned and we'd arrived and you know meeting up with them actually wasn't planned. Like this trip, it was sort of serendipitous in a sense because Jason and I had planned this trip and there was a whole uh thing that happened before we got to England and Ireland and Scotland. We were all through Europe. The whole thing was about 2 months. And it was about 2 months before we were about to leave for the trip. And we got word that Leatherface was playing in Buffalo. And this would be our first time ever seeing the band live. And so we go there. All of Toronto goes to Buffalo. And that's where we ended up meeting them. And Jason, you know, he's so, you know, he made fast friends with them, you know, and he just asked the drummer. He was like, or actually the drummer Laney would, you know, he said, if you're gonna be around Sunderland, give me a call. And Jason called him. Like at that time in life where you actually did that, you picked up the phone. So he called him and he was like, yeah, sure. So we were visiting Jason's family in England somewhere around there. And so we ended up going up there and hanging out with them. But when we were there, we ended up meeting up. We were just on a bus going back into Sunderland, and Davy Burden gets on the bus and he's like, "You guys should come to a practice tomorrow morning." And we're like, "Wow, yeah." And so we ended up in their actual rehearsal space. And at that time they were rehearsing for their upcoming release Horse Box. And to be an observer in that room was, yeah, it really moved me, you know, going from, and especially being there with Jason, because he's the one that introduces me to this band way across the ocean back home in this little dingy basement up in North Toronto. And then how many years later, and we're in their rehearsal space together, watching them create a new song. And it was fantastic. It was, and to this day, that chorus of that song, Sour Grapes, is like, it's one of the greatest choruses I've ever heard, but probably because of how, nostalgic it makes me.
Such a cool story. And you say the trip with Jason was like a Leatherface song,
Mhm.
where, and this is what you write, where buried beneath a gruff exterior, something grander was unfolding. And like the lyrics, we wouldn't understand the magnitude of our journey for years to come. What will you
Mhm.
remember most about that experience?
The trip?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, exactly like what I said. I remember being on the trip and getting home, or it's about to end, and us talking about what we were gonna, because we're both so interested in songwriting and expression. And I remember telling him, "Oh, I'm gonna write this thing." And he's like, "I'm gonna let it sink in for a while." And it's funny, I remember that so clearly, but it really is. It parallels a Leatherface song in the sense that it took me, I knew that the trip was important. It was our first big trip. We're getting out, we're 23, seeing the world, seeing new experiences and experiencing all these amazing things. Um, it just, it did take a long time for it to sink in. And it's just weird the way that it really did begin to parallel Leatherface in the sense that, yeah, it was just complex, and it meant a lot. And when you start digging, there's it's full of substance.
So I'm sure people are wondering, Jason Dwyer, what's Jason up to these days? Do you keep in touch with him?
Yeah, I mean, we drifted for sure. And um that's what I found most interesting about the book. I don't think it would have been as interesting if we were like still the tightest friends. I thought it was really interesting that we went through this huge thing together, and a lot of different moments, and we drifted, and I guess that's where the ties that bind, or just one of the threads for sure is him and I. Um,
Do you know? Has he read the book? Do you know?
no, no, but I'm getting one to him today,
Oh, that's
actually.
great.
Yeah, and I hope he likes it. If I know him the way that I did, he should. But writing about other people's always a bit weird. But at the moment, he is playing. He still plays, and he plays in a new band called Drift Current, um, with our friend John DeMarco, who is also in the book. Um, and yeah, it's a great band.
Well, you thanked him in the acknowledgments. You say Thank you to Jason Dwyer, who urged me to be adventurous for the miles and memories and for introducing me to one of the greatest records ever made.
Mhm.
Yeah, Days and Days, a story about Sunderland's Leatherface and the ties that bind. It's out now. You can find it wherever books are sold. And if people want to reach out to you, Chris, where can people find you online?
Yeah, almost anywhere. I'm on Instagram at the Red Beauty, Chris MacDonald. Um, there's even a shop Instagram under my thumb tattoos. I'm on Facebook, um, Gmail under my thumb tattoos at gmail.com. I'm around.
You're around. All right, man.
Yep.
Thanks so much for taking some time to talk about the book. Congrats on the book. Great job.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.